The Tri-Agency Research Data Management Policy is formalizing new expectations for how data is handled across Canadian post-secondary institutions and research hospitals. Since its launch in March 2021, the agencies have moved through a series of planned milestones to integrate data stewardship into the grant lifecycle. The implementation moved from required data management plans in 2022 to the 2023 deadline for publishing institutional strategies. Now the focus is on the next major milestone, the late 2026 enforcement phase. By late 2026, the data deposit requirement becomes a mandatory condition of the standard grant agreements issued by the CIHR, NSERC, and SSHRC. This deadline is creating pressure on academic libraries and research teams. Smaller institutions lack the curation staff to scale support, while larger entities are hesitant to accept the legal and financial liabilities of stewarding restricted access, highly sensitive datasets. Many researchers are hesitant to act, fearing that maintaining their federal funding will force them to release sensitive clinical health records or proprietary corporate data onto public servers. This anxiety stems from a professional misconception about the policy's intent. The objective of the mandate is sound data stewardship, long-term preservation, and scientific discovery. It is not a policy for forced public disclosure. The Tri-Agency framework treats the physical deposit of files and the public sharing of those files as two separate stages of the research lifecycle. Data deposit does not mean open data. There is a specific operational mechanism designed for high-risk research. It allows investigators to achieve total compliance while keeping their raw, sensitive data restricted. Understanding the mechanics of what must be deposited and the legal pathways to restrict access is the only way a principal investigator will navigate the 2026 enforcement phase without risking their funding or their participants' privacy. Compliance cannot be achieved by simply uploading a folder of unstructured raw data or arbitrary numerical files. The policy states that grant recipients must archive the digital foundation underpinning their scientific claims. This requirement includes both finalized journal publications and public preprints. The required deposit package has three components. First, curated digital data, the specific evidentiary subset needed to replicate published findings. Second, metadata, structured schemas and codebooks making datasets machine-readable. Third, code, specific analysis scripts and custom algorithms used to generate statistical outputs. In modern computational research, raw data is often unusable without the specific software pathways used to analyze it. Failing to curate and bundle all three of these distinct digital assets means failing the federal compliance audit. Once the package is assembled and deposited, the next step is determining its public availability. The agencies explicitly endorse a balanced principle. Research data should be as open as possible, as closed as necessary. Three major exceptions prohibit open access. First, human participant privacy. Under TCPS2, protecting personal information overrides data sharing. Second, intellectual property and national security under the STRAC policy. Third, Indigenous data sovereignty, requiring a distinctions-based approach for First Nations, Métis, or Inuit. Research frameworks like OCAP and the CARE principles assert community control over data. Depositing Indigenous data into national repositories is prohibited without explicit community-led consent. Ethical obligations, legal boundaries, and Indigenous rights act as absolute hard stops that override any push for open scientific data. This creates a central paradox. How do you satisfy a federal deposit mandate for data that is legally or ethically prohibited from being shared? The solution utilized by research libraries is the metadata-only deposit. Under a metadata-only deposit, sensitive datasets are never uploaded publicly. They are stored in a secure offline vault. Instead, the researcher creates a public tombstone record, a standardized index card within a digital repository detailing methodology and minting a global DOI. Crucially, this record includes the explicit terms of access. These terms instruct other investigators on the exact legal steps, such as executing a formal data transfer agreement, required to request access to the offline data. The metadata-only deposit satisfies the Tri-Agency's demand for discovery and preservation while maintaining strict access controls over the raw files. Once the record is ready, practical execution requires selecting the right Canadian infrastructure to host it. Mapping the national ecosystem. Datasets under 3.5 gigabytes route left to Borealis, offering institutional dataverses and file integrity checks. Massive terabyte-scale datasets route right to the Federated Research Data Repository, or FRDR, where eligible researchers receive 1 terabyte of default storage. However, FRDR is currently an open repository, making it unsuitable for hosting raw, sensitive datasets until the Controlled Access Management pilot is fully active. Correctly routing data requires knowing the technical limits and security parameters of Canada's nonprofit repositories. Waiting until a paper is accepted for publication to figure out data deposit will guarantee a compliance failure in 2026. Research data management must be recontextualized as an active component of your study design rather than a retrospective administrative task. Principal investigators should engage with their local research ethics boards today. As this workflow shows, ethical consent forms must explicitly include deposit-ready language from the start. Participants must be informed that while their raw data remains restricted, metadata records will be archived to meet federal requirements. Research teams should structure their analysis code for reproducibility immediately and formalize their data management plans to identify target repositories early. Architect your compliance strategy at the beginning, utilize the metadata mechanism to protect your participants, and secure your funding lifecycle before the 2026 enforcement phase begins.